She wasn't idle. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't faithless. She was busy. Busy cooking. Busy cleaning. Busy preparing. Busy serving. And that busyness nearly cost her everything. Not her life, not her reputation, not her home, but something far more precious. The moment. The moment when God Himself sat in her living room, and she was too distracted to sit down. Her name was Martha. And this isn't just a story about a woman who was too busy. It's the story of how one person's anxiety, grief, and misplaced devotion became the stage on which Jesus performed one of the greatest miracles the world had ever seen. It's the story of what happens when you stop performing for God and start trusting Him. And it begins in a small village just outside Jerusalem, in a place called Bethany. Bethany was not a famous city. It wasn't Jerusalem with its towering temple and its streets full of priests and pilgrims. It wasn't Capernaum, where Jesus had performed so many miracles that the people there had grown almost numb to them. It wasn't Jericho or Caesarea Philippi or any of the great centers of power and commerce that dotted the ancient world. Bethany was small, quiet, ordinary, a village sitting on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, about 2 miles from Jerusalem, close enough to the holy city to feel its gravity, but far enough away to breathe. A place where people knew each other's names, where children played in the same dusty streets their parents had played in, where the rhythms of life were simple: plant, harvest, pray, rest, repeat. And in that village lived a family, 3 siblings, no mention of parents, no record of a husband for either of the sisters. Just the 3 of them, together in a home that would one day become one of the most significant addresses in all of Scripture. Martha, the oldest, the one who ran the household, the one who made things happen. Mary, the younger sister, the quiet one, the one who watched and listened and sat at the feet of whoever was speaking, absorbing everything. And Lazarus, their brother, their anchor, the man whose death would crack Martha's world open and whose resurrection would reveal the deepest truth she had ever been invited to believe. But before we get there, we need to understand who Martha was, because Martha has often been misunderstood. She has been reduced to a caricature: the busy woman, the anxious hostess, the one who complained while her sister sat doing nothing, the one Jesus gently corrected. But that reading is too shallow, too dismissive. Martha was a woman of extraordinary capacity. In a world where women had almost no public standing, Martha owned a home. The Gospel of Luke tells us clearly. A woman named Martha welcomed him into her home, not her father's home, not her husband's home, her home. That detail matters. It means Martha had resources, responsibility, and authority. She was a woman of substance in her community. She was also a woman of deep faith. This is not someone who was ignorant of God. This is someone who believed passionately, earnestly. She knew the Scriptures. She knew the promises. When the moment of crisis came, the words that came out of her mouth revealed a woman who had been thinking about God, about resurrection, about Messiah for years. She was also a woman of courage. When others stayed back, Martha stepped forward. When her world fell apart, Martha ran toward Jesus, not away from him. Even in her grief, even in her confusion, even in her pain, she moved toward the source of life. Martha was not a weak woman. She was not a shallow woman. She was not a faithless woman. She was a woman in process, a woman being stretched, being taught, being loved into something deeper than she had yet known. And her story begins with an invitation. At some point during the ministry of Jesus, he and his disciples passed through Bethany. We don't know exactly when in his ministry this was. The Gospel of Luke places it during his journey toward Jerusalem, the long, deliberate journey that would end at the cross. He was moving through villages and towns, teaching, healing, challenging the religious establishment, and training his disciples. And in the village of Bethany, he stopped. Martha opened her home to him. Think about what that means. Jesus didn't travel alone. He had 12 disciples with him regularly, and often a wider circle of followers as well. Feeding that many people, providing space for that many people, managing the logistics of hospitality on that scale, that was not a small thing. In the ancient world, hospitality was one of the most sacred social obligations. To welcome someone into your home was to take responsibility for them, to provide for them, to honor them. Martha took that seriously. So when Jesus arrived, she did what she always did. She got to work. She moved to the kitchen. She started preparing food. She began coordinating, planning, executing. Her hands were busy, her mind was occupied. There were 100 things to do, and not enough time to do them. This was love, in her language. Acts of service, practical provision, making sure everyone was fed, comfortable, cared for. But while Martha worked, her sister Mary sat down, not to rest, not to avoid the work, but because something had captivated her completely. Jesus was speaking, and Mary could not tear herself away. She sat at his feet, the posture of a disciple receiving instruction from a rabbi, and she listened. She absorbed every word. She was present, fully present, in a way that Martha, busy in the other room, was not. And the tension in that house began to build. Martha moved faster. The work piled up. The meal wasn't ready. The dishes needed washing. There were guests to attend to, and her sister was just sitting there, doing nothing. At least, that's how it looked. Finally, Martha reached her breaking point. She came to Jesus and said, what so many of us have thought, but rarely had the nerve to say out loud, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Read that again slowly. Don't you care? She's not just complaining about her sister. She's questioning Jesus. She's frustrated not only with Mary, but with the fact that the Lord of the universe seems to be allowing this injustice to continue. Doesn't he see what's happening? Doesn't he see how unfair this is? Doesn't he care? This is raw, this is honest, this is messy, and it is deeply, painfully human. How many of us have stood in our own kitchens, our own offices, our own lives, doing all the right things, working all the hard hours, carrying all the weight, and looked around and thought, does anyone even notice? Does God even see? Doesn't he care? Jesus heard her. He always does. And his response was not what she expected. He didn't rebuke her harshly. He didn't dismiss her feelings. He didn't take sides in the way she wanted him to. He spoke her name. Twice. Martha, Martha. There is something in the repetition of a name that is both tender and serious. It is the voice of someone who truly sees you. Not what you're doing, not what you're producing. You. The person underneath all the activity. Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. Worried, upset about many things. Jesus wasn't criticizing her hospitality. He wasn't saying her service didn't matter. He wasn't saying work is bad or that practical provision is unspiritual. He was diagnosing something deeper. Martha was anxious, distracted, pulled in 1,000 directions by 1,000 concerns. And in all of that movement, in all of that activity, she had missed the one thing that mattered most in that moment: his presence. Mary had chosen presence. Martha had chosen performance. And performance, even beautiful, generous, loving performance, can become a way of avoiding the very thing we most need: to sit still, to be known, to receive, rather than always give. This was the first lesson Martha needed to learn, but it was not the last. Time passed. Martha continued to live in Bethany. She continued to open her home, to serve, to provide. We have no record of what changed immediately after that first encounter, but something had been planted, a seed of deeper understanding, a question that had been quietly turning in her heart. What does it mean to sit at his feet? What does it mean to choose the better thing? And then the unthinkable happened. Lazarus got sick, not a mild illness, not something that would pass in a few days with rest and herbs and the care of his sisters. Something serious, something frightening, something that was getting worse. Martha and Mary did the only thing they could think to do. They sent word to Jesus. The message was simple, almost heartbreaking in its simplicity. Lord, the one you love is sick. They didn't demand. They didn't command. They didn't even ask. They simply stated the truth and trusted that the one who loved Lazarus would know what to do. It was an act of faith. And then they waited. They waited for Jesus to come. He didn't. Hours passed. Days passed. And Lazarus grew weaker. And Jesus, the one who had healed strangers from a distance, the one who had restored sight to blind eyes and life to the limbs of the paralyzed, the one who said he loved this family, did not come. He received the message, Scripture tells us. He knew. And he said something strange to his disciples. This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. And then he waited 2 more days before he moved. 2 more days. Can you imagine what those 2 days felt like in Bethany? Martha watching her brother's breathing grow shallow, Mary weeping, the house filling with neighbors and friends who had heard that Lazarus was dying. The silence from the road, no dust of approaching travelers, no sound of sandals on stone, no voice she recognized calling out in the distance. Nothing. And then Lazarus died. The worst had happened. The thing they had hoped and prayed and sent word to prevent had come anyway. Lazarus was dead. They wrapped him in burial cloths. They placed him in the tomb. They rolled the stone across the entrance. And Martha, the woman who held everything together, the woman who made things work, the woman who had spent her life managing, providing, and fixing, stood outside a sealed tomb and had nothing left to do. Nothing to prepare, nothing to serve, nothing to fix. Just grief. Raw, bottomless, overwhelming grief. And the silence of a God who had not come in time. 4 days later, Jesus arrived. By this time, the house in Bethany was full of mourners. Jewish burial customs required the community to gather, to sit with the bereaved, to weep together. Many people had come from Jerusalem, just 2 miles away, to comfort Martha and Mary. When word reached Martha that Jesus was coming down the road, she didn't stay in the house. She ran. This detail matters. Mary stayed home. The grieving, the weeping, the waiting, she remained in the house. But Martha, Even in her devastation, even with her heart broken and her brother 4 days in the grave, got up and moved. She ran to meet him. And when she reached him, the words that came out of her mouth were not what you might expect from someone who had just endured what she had endured. They were not words of anger. They were not words of accusation. Well, almost. "Lord," she said, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. If you had been here." 4 words that carried a lifetime of feeling, the weight of those 2 days of waiting, the silence on the road, the sound of the stone being rolled across the tomb, the 4 days of grief. Everything she had held back, everything she had managed and suppressed and organized and pushed through, condensed into 4 words. If you had been here. This is honest prayer. This is what faith looks like when it is not performing for an audience. This is a woman bringing her truest self to God. And then, immediately, something remarkable happens. She doesn't stop there. In the same breath, she adds, "But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Even now, with the stone rolled shut, even now 4 days in, even now when all hope by any human measure had dissolved, even now, I believe something is possible that I cannot yet name or see or understand. This is extraordinary faith. This is not blind optimism. Martha was not the kind of woman who indulged in wishful thinking. She was practical. She was clear-eyed. She knew her brother was dead. She was not in denial about what had happened, but she also knew who she was standing in front of. And she refused to reduce him to what she had seen him do before. Jesus heard her. He looked at her and said, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha, drawing on everything she had learned, everything she had been taught in the synagogue, everything she believed about the last day and the resurrection to come, responded, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." She had faith, real faith, mature faith, theologically informed faith. But it was faith about the future, faith about the last day, faith about what God would do eventually at the end of time. She believed in resurrection as a doctrine. She had not yet believed in resurrection as a person standing right in front of her, and Jesus was about to close that gap. What Jesus said next would change everything, not just for Martha, not just for Lazarus, not just for Bethany, for all of us. For every person who has ever stood at a sealed tomb in any form and wondered whether anything could still be done. Jesus looked at this grieving, running, honest, imperfect, faith-filled, anxious, extraordinary woman, and he said, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die." And then he asked her the most important question she had ever been asked. "Do you believe this?" Not, "Do you believe in resurrection as a concept?" Not, "Do you know the theology of the last day?" Not, "Are you familiar with the Pharisees' position on bodily resurrection?" Do you believe this? Do you believe me? Do you believe that what you are looking for, what every human heart aches for, life beyond death, hope beyond despair, reversal beyond every ending, do you believe that it is not a doctrine but a person, and that that person is standing here, right now, in front of you? Martha didn't flinch. "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." This is one of the greatest declarations of faith in all of the New Testament. It stands alongside Peter's confession. It stands alongside Thomas's cry of, "My Lord and my God." It stands as one of the clearest, most complete, most theologically rich declarations of who Jesus is found anywhere in the Gospels. And it came from Martha, the woman who had been too busy, the woman who had complained, the woman who had said, "If you had been here," the woman who was worried and upset about many things. That woman stood at the edge of her grief with the stone still rolled across her brother's tomb and declared, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who was to come." I believe this was not the Martha of the kitchen. This was not the Martha of the complaint. This was the Martha who had been through the fire and come out with gold. Jesus asked where Lazarus had been laid. The crowd moved toward the tomb. And then Scripture records something that has stopped readers in their tracks for 2,000 years. Jesus wept. 2 words in English, the shortest verse in the Bible, but carrying the weight of everything. The God who had spoken the universe into existence, who had stretched out the heavens like a curtain and set the foundations of the earth, stood at the grave of his friend, not because he didn't know what was about to happen, not because he had lost hope, not because he was overwhelmed by despair, but because he was fully human as well as fully divine. Because grief is real, because death is the enemy, because the people he loved were in pain, and because, even knowing what he was about to do, he did not rush past the sorrow of the moment. He stayed in it, he honored it, he wept with those who wept. The crowd saw his tears and said, "See how he loved him." Others muttered, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" And then they reached the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." And here Martha, practical, clear-eyed, managing Martha, spoke again. "But Lord, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." She was right. This was not a trivial concern. 4 days in a first-century tomb in the Middle East meant decomposition. It meant the kind of smell that announces death unmistakably. There was no ambiguity here about whether Lazarus might merely be unconscious. He was dead, thoroughly, demonstrably, irreversibly dead. Martha was not doubting. She was being practical. But Jesus reminded her of something. "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Did I not tell you? There is gentleness here, and patience." He is not scolding her. He is redirecting her attention. "Remember what I said. Remember what you confessed. Remember who I told you I am." The stone was rolled away. Jesus looked up and prayed, not because he needed to ask permission from his Father, but so that the people standing around him would understand where his power came from. He prayed out loud for their benefit, so they would know this was not magic, this was not theater. This was the Son of God, acting in perfect unity with the Father. And then he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." Silence. Every person at that tomb held their breath. And then, from inside the darkness of that sealed cave, there was movement. Lazarus came out, still wrapped in burial cloths, his hands and feet bound, a cloth around his face, walking out of the place of death and back into the world of the living. The crowd erupted. Jesus said, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go. Let him go. Free him. Unwrap him. Release him from the trappings of death. He is alive. Let him live like it." And in the noise and the weeping and the astonishment of that moment, somewhere in that crowd was Martha. Martha, who had run to meet him. Martha, who had said, "If you had been here." Martha, who had confessed, "I believe you are the Messiah." Martha, who had warned about the smell and been redirected back to faith. Martha, who now watched her dead brother walk out of a tomb. What do you do in a moment like that? What do you feel? What do you say? How do you process the gap between what you feared and what you witnessed? The text doesn't tell us, but it doesn't need to. Because Martha's story isn't over yet, the raising of Lazarus sent shockwaves through the region. Many people who had come to mourn and who witnessed what happened put their faith in Jesus. The news spread rapidly, reaching the ears of the Pharisees and the chief priests. They called an emergency meeting of the Sanhedrin. They were afraid. If this man kept doing things like this, everyone would believe in him and the Romans would come and destroy their nation. It was in that meeting that the high priest Caiaphas spoke the words that set the final events in motion. It is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. He meant it as cold political calculation. He did not know he was prophesying. The religious authorities made their decision. Jesus must die. And so the final days drew closer. Jesus, knowing what was coming, withdrew with his disciples for a time to a village called Ephraim. But as the Passover approached, he returned. He came back toward Jerusalem. He came back through Bethany. And in Bethany, 6 days before the Passover, a dinner was given in his honor. The Gospel of John tells us it was held at the home of Simon the leper, a man Jesus had presumably healed at some point. But it is who was at the table that matters for our story. Lazarus was there, reclining at the table with Jesus. The man who had been dead was eating dinner with the one who had called him back to life. And Martha? Martha was serving. Of course she was. But here is what is different now. The last time we saw Martha serve, it was from a place of anxiety and resentment. She was frantic, scattered, distracted, upset. Her service had curdled into complaint, her love had become burden. But this time, there is no complaint recorded, no resentment, no frustration with her sister, no plea for Jesus to intervene in the domestic arrangements. Just Martha, serving, quiet, present, at peace. She had not stopped working. She had not become Mary. She had not abandoned her gifts or her calling or her nature. But something had changed underneath all of it. She had met the resurrection. She had stood at the edge of the impossible and watched God do what no human hand could do. She had confessed her faith and seen it confirmed in the most dramatic way imaginable. And now she served, not from fear or anxiety or the need to be needed, but from a heart that had been freed. This is the arc of Martha's story. Not from busy to idle, not from active to passive, not from serving to sitting, but from anxious service to peaceful service, from performance to offering, from striving to resting, from doing things for God out of a need to prove herself, to doing things with God out of gratitude for what He had already done. The hands were still moving, but the heart was different. While Martha served, Mary did something extraordinary. She took a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume worth nearly a year's wages, and she poured it on the feet of Jesus. She wiped his feet with her hair. The fragrance filled the entire house, and the room went silent. Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, who would within days betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, objected loudly. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He didn't say this because he cared about the poor. John notes plainly that Judas was a thief who used to help himself to what was put in the money bag. He said it because the extravagance offended him. Jesus rebuked him. "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial." You will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. Mary had chosen, again, the better thing. She had understood, in a way, that the disciples themselves had not yet grasped what was about to happen to Jesus. She had taken what was most precious to her and poured it out at his feet, not because it was logical, not because it was efficient, but because some moments call for extravagance, because some things are worth everything you have. And in that room, with the fragrance of nard filling the air, with Lazarus alive at the table and Martha serving in peace, something sacred was happening. The family of Bethany, the three siblings who had become perhaps the most beloved household in the Gospels, was giving Jesus what they had. Martha gave her hands, her home, her hospitality. Mary gave her treasure, her tears, her worship. Lazarus gave his presence, the testimony of a life that death could not hold. Each one offering, each one transformed, each one reflecting a different facet of what it means to love God with everything you are. We don't hear from Martha again after this. The Gospels move on. Jesus enters Jerusalem in triumph on Palm Sunday. He teaches in the temple. He shares the Last Supper with his disciples. He is arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. He is tried, condemned, crucified, and buried. And on the third day, he rises. We don't know where Martha was during all of this. We don't know if she was among the women at the cross, but we know what she carried with her. She had seen a dead man walk out of a tomb. She had heard the voice of Jesus call her name twice, with tenderness and correction. She had stood at the intersection of her deepest grief and her deepest faith, and she had not run away. She had confessed, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who was to come into the world." And she had been right. What does Martha's story teach us? It teaches us several things that we desperately need to hear. First, it teaches us that service is holy, but anxiety is not. Martha's impulse to serve was not wrong. Hospitality is a gift. Practical love is real love. Working with your hands, preparing a meal, making a space for others to be welcomed and fed and cared for, these are not lesser callings. They are expressions of the image of God in us. But service that is driven by anxiety, by the need to be needed, by the fear that things will fall apart if we stop, by the resentment that builds when our labor goes unnoticed, that kind of service has become something other than a gift. It has become a burden, a trap, a way of staying constantly in motion so that we never have to be still and ask ourselves the hard questions. Martha's busyness was her armor. As long as she was doing something, she didn't have to feel everything. Jesus saw through the armor. He called her name. He invited her to set down what she was carrying, not permanently, not forever, not because service doesn't matter, but because in that particular moment, what she needed most was not to give, but to receive. Second, it teaches us that honest prayer is more powerful than polished prayer. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That is not a tidy prayer. That is not the kind of prayer that sounds good in a church setting. That is the prayer of a broken heart that has not yet resolved the gap between what it believed and what it experienced. And Jesus honored it. He didn't rebuke her for the if. He didn't correct her theology before he responded to her pain. He met her where she was. God is not frightened by your raw edges. He is not put off by your if-only prayers. He does not require you to have everything worked out before you come to him. You can bring your unanswered questions. You can bring your confusion. You can bring the grief that doesn't make sense, and the silence that felt like abandonment, and the moments when you waited and he did not come. He can handle it. He has been handling it since the beginning of time. Third, it teaches us that faith is not certainty. It is trust in the face of uncertainty. Martha believed in resurrection. She had been taught it. She affirmed it. But she didn't know what Jesus was about to do. She couldn't have known. No one who had been dead 4 days had ever walked out of a tomb. Yet she confessed her faith anyway. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. She didn't fully understand what that meant in this moment. She didn't know that saying those words was setting the stage for one of the greatest miracles in human history. She was simply telling the truth about what she believed, in the middle of not knowing how it was going to unfold. That is faith. It is not having all the answers. It is trusting the one who does. Fourth, it teaches us that God does not discard his struggling servants. Martha was corrected by Jesus. Twice in different ways. Once at the dinner, once at the tomb. And yet she is not discarded. She is not sidelined. She is not replaced by someone with a better attitude or a quieter spirit. She is loved, invited, included. The fact that Jesus corrected Martha is not evidence that he was disappointed in her. It is evidence that he was invested in her. You don't take the time to speak truth to someone you don't care about. He called her name twice. He saw her fully. He corrected her gently. He used her anyway. And, at the end of her story, she is still at the table, still serving, still part of the family that he loved. God does not throw away his work in progress people. He works in them, through them, in spite of them, and because of them. Fifth, it teaches us that different gifts are not competing gifts. Mary and Martha are often set up against each other, as if the story is asking us to choose between them. Active or contemplative, doing or being, serving or worshipping. But that is not what the story is saying. It is saying that in that particular moment, what was needed was presence, not productivity. It was saying that the meal could wait, but the Master was here now. In the second story, at the anointing dinner, both women are doing what they do. Martha serves, Mary worships, and Jesus receives both. He doesn't tell Martha to sit down and watch Mary. He doesn't tell Mary to get up and help Martha. He is present with both of them. The church needs Marthas and Marys. It needs people who will organize the meal and set the table and show up early and stay late and make sure everyone is taken care of. It also needs people who will sit at Jesus' feet and pray and weep and pour out extravagant worship and refuse to be talked out of devotion by those who think it's impractical. And most of us, at different seasons of our lives, need to be both. Stone rolled across the entrance, grave clothes inside, the unmistakable smell of death. And Martha, standing there with all of her faith and all of her grief and all of her questions and all of her hope, she almost talked him out of it. But Lord, by this time there is a bad odor. 4 days is too long, it's too late, it's too far gone, even you can't do anything about this now. But Lord, how many times have we said those words? But Lord, this marriage is too broken. But Lord, this addiction has gone on too long. But Lord, this dream is dead and buried. But Lord, this relationship is cold and sealed and beyond recovering. But Lord, I've been waiting too long, praying too long, believing too long. But Lord, and Jesus says, as he said to Martha, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? The impossibility of your situation is not a reason for God to stand down. It is an opportunity for him to show up not despite the 4 days, because of the 4 days. The longer it has been, the more undeniable the miracle will be. 4 days was past argument, past doubt, past every possible human explanation. 4 days was only one thing: resurrection. And when Lazarus came out, there was no one in that crowd who could explain what they had just seen in any other terms than the ones Jesus himself had used. I am the resurrection. I am the life. He had said it. He had done it. He had proved it. And Martha, the woman who had been worried and upset about many things, the woman who had complained and confessed and wept and run and doubted and believed, Martha was there to see it. She had stayed in the story long enough for the miracle. The raising of Lazarus was not just a miracle for one family in one village. It was the event that accelerated the final sequence of the gospel story. When the news spread, many believed. And the religious authorities, alarmed by the growing movement around Jesus, made the decision to have him arrested and killed. The resurrection of Lazarus was the domino that started the chain of events leading to the cross. Which means that Martha's grief, Martha's loss, Martha's 4 days of waiting, Martha's sealed tomb, was the very circumstance that God used to set in motion the salvation of the world. Let that land. What felt to Martha like abandonment was actually positioning. What looked like delay was actually divine timing. What seemed like the worst thing that could happen to her family was actually the doorway through which God would reveal his glory. She could not have seen that from where she was standing. But God knew. He always does. And he is not absent from your story either. He is not indifferent to your sealed tomb. He is not unaware of how many days it has been. He is not surprised by the smell of what seemed dead and gone. He is simply waiting for the moment when what he does can no longer be explained any other way. Epilogue. The woman who ran. We began with an orphan. We ended with a queen. A witness to the impossible. A witness to the moment when a dead man walked out of a grave. A witness to the truth that death is not the final word. A witness to the reality that the God who had been silent was not absent. Martha teaches us that the life of faith is not a straight line from doubt to certainty. It is a winding road through grief and service and complaint and confession and loss and miracle and dinner tables and sealed tombs and the sound of a voice calling a dead man back to life. It passes through the moments when you are too busy to sit still and the moments when you have nothing left to do but weep. It includes the times you ran to meet Jesus and the times you warned him about the smell. It includes every awkward, honest, imperfect prayer, and it ends again and again at the open tomb, at the miracle, at the moment the stone is rolled away, at the sound of a voice that calls the dead things in your life and says, "Come out."